Crisis planning involves identifying potential risks and hazards that could impact the organization and developing a plan to manage and mitigate them effectively. One of the main benefits of crisis planning is that it allows organizations to proactively prepare for potential crises rather than reacting. In this way, crisis planning helps organizations maintain control and minimize damage during an emergency. One of the key elements of crisis planning is identifying potential risks and hazards, which involves assessing the organization's vulnerabilities and identifying the areas most likely to be impacted by a crisis. By identifying potential risks and threats ahead of time, organizations can develop plans and procedures to manage and mitigate those risks effectively. Plans include developing communication strategies, identifying key stakeholders, and training staff to respond to crises. Crisis planning allows organizations to be proactive rather than reactive. When an organization faces a crisis, thinking clearly and making rational decisions can be challenging. By having a plan in place ahead of time, organizations can respond quickly and effectively to a crisis, minimizing damage and maintaining control. Planning allows organizations to reduce reputational damage and maintain trust with stakeholders. Effective communication is crucial during a crisis, as it helps to keep stakeholders informed and reassured. It's important organizations work to develop a communication plan that includes clear and consistent messaging to ensure key stakeholders are informed through both internal and external distribution channels. It's also important that staff routinely train for such crises to ensure the communication plans and the subsequent crisis response are handled efficiently. Let's look at how to establish a crisis plan within an organization. The first step in crisis communication is preparation. This involves outlining procedures for responding to various crises, delegating roles to each team member, and assigning specific tasks. It should also involve evaluating past crises to understand how your team responded and if there are any areas of improvement. Lastly, you'll also want to develop key messages and design a media strategy to communicate effectively with your stakeholders. Remember, the purpose of the preparation phase is not necessarily to predict future crises, but rather to create a versatile response program flexible enough to handle any crisis. You'll then want to develop a communication strategy, which will include determining who will communicate what information to internal and external stakeholders, such as employees, customers, media, and regulatory agencies. Also, determine how and when the information will be communicated. This could include creating press releases, newsletters, or communicating via social media. While public perception is often at the forefront of a crisis, remember that crises can also greatly impact internal operations at your organization. Developing a plan for restoring normal operations is key. Following the crisis, evaluate the efficacy of your crisis plan and identify any areas for improvement. Was the crisis plan effective in addressing the issue? Were the right people involved in the crisis plan? How could the response time have been improved? And were there any communication or coordination issues during the crisis? After evaluating these questions, you can then revise your crisis communication plan accordingly. In addition, it's also a great idea to regularly train employees on the crisis plan and procedures to ensure readiness to respond effectively. Crisis planning is essential to an organization's overall communication strategy. It helps organizations to proactively prepare for potential crises rather than reacting in the moment. By identifying potential risks and hazards ahead of time, organizations can develop plans and procedures to manage and mitigate those risks effectively, minimizing damage and maintaining control.